If you ask me, the Nintendo Switch is still one of the best places to play platformer adventure games in 2026. This system has such a crazy good mix of big Nintendo masterpieces, indie gems, and action platformers that feel amazing in handheld mode. I grew up loving this genre, so lists like this are always fun for me, because platformers are the kind of games that remind me why I fell in love with gaming in the first place. Great movement, smart level design, memorable worlds, and that feeling of always wanting to see what is around the next corner, that is what makes these games special. So today, I am counting down 10 of the best platformer adventure games you can play on Nintendo Switch right now. These are the ones I keep recommending over and over. Let's get into it. Super Mario Odyssey is still the king for me when it comes to pure platforming joy on Nintendo Switch. Everything about this game feels smooth, creative, and packed with charm. Mario controls so well that just moving around is fun, and Cappy adds a whole extra layer to the gameplay by letting you capture enemies and objects in ways that constantly surprise you. One minute you are bouncing across rooftops, and the next you are controlling a tank, a frog, or even a giant dinosaur. That variety never gets old. What I love most is how every kingdom feels like a playground full of secrets. There is always another moon to find, another challenge room to clear, or another hidden trick to discover. It is the kind of game that makes me smile the whole time, and honestly, that is why it still feels timeless in 2026. Kirby and the Forgotten Land was such a big moment for Kirby because it finally gave him a full three-dimensional adventure that actually delivered. And the best part is, it feels natural right away. The game takes Kirby's usual cute style and drops it into these abandoned world environments that somehow feel cozy, mysterious, and really fun to explore. I love how approachable it is, but it still has enough challenge and clever design to keep experienced players interested. Mouthful mode is also one of those ideas that sounds silly at first, then ends up being one of the most memorable mechanics in the whole game. Turning into a car, a vending machine, or a giant ring never stops being entertaining. It is colorful, polished, and surprisingly heartfelt. For me, this is one of the easiest platformer adventure games to recommend to basically anyone with a Switch. Hat in Time feels like a love letter to classic 3D platformers, and that is exactly why I enjoy it so much on Switch. It has that playful energy that reminds me of older Nintendo platformers, but it still brings its own personality with sharp writing, weird humor, and creative level themes. Hat Kid is a fantastic main character, and the movement feels snappy enough that running, jumping, diving, and exploring always stays fun. What really makes this game stand out for me is how different each world feels. One area can be bright and silly, then suddenly the next one feels spooky or surprisingly intense. That variety gives the whole adventure a lot of personality. It is not just about collecting stuff, it is about seeing what bizarre idea the game throws at you next. If you miss the style of old school 3D platformers, this one absolutely deserves a spot on your Switch.
You do this to me, lassie!
Metroid Dread is one of the sharpest and most satisfying action platformers on Nintendo Switch. This game feels fast, tense, and precise in a way that instantly grabbed me. Samus controls beautifully, and every movement, slide, jump, and counter feels incredibly polished. What I love most is how the game keeps pushing you forward with that classic Metroid structure, where every new ability opens up more of the world and makes you feel stronger. The map design is smart, and the pacing is excellent, because it always feels like you are discovering something meaningful. Then you have the EMI sections, which bring this extra layer of pressure that makes the whole adventure feel more intense. I know some people found those parts stressful, but for me they made Dread stand out even more. It is stylish, challenging, and one of the best examples of how good a modern side-scrolling adventure can feel. Hollow Knight is one of those games I keep coming back to, because it does almost everything right. The world of Hallownest is beautiful in a sad, haunting kind of way, and exploring it feels incredibly rewarding. This game nails that sense of mystery, where every new area makes you want to go deeper and see what secrets are hiding there. The platforming is tight, the combat feels clean, and the boss fights are some of my favorites in the genre. There is a real sense of progress as you unlock new movement abilities and start understanding how all the areas connect. What makes Hollow Knight special to me is the atmosphere. It feels lonely, strange, and unforgettable, but never empty. There is always some little detail in the art, music, or world design pulling you in. On Switch, it is honestly one of the best value games ever, and still a must-play in 2026. and the Blind Forest Definitive Edition is one of the most emotional platformer adventures I have played on Switch. Right away, the art style and music pull you in, and the whole game feels like you are moving through a beautiful animated film. But this is not just a game that looks good, it also plays really well. Ori's movement starts simple, then gradually becomes faster and more fluid as you unlock new abilities. By the time you are chaining jumps, wall runs, and air dashes together, it feels fantastic. The escape sequences are also a huge highlight because they are intense and memorable without overstaying their welcome. I also really like how the story is told in a simple but effective way that gives the whole journey a lot of heart. If you want a platformer adventure with strong atmosphere and satisfying movement, this one is still easy to recommend. Ori and the Will of the Wisps took everything I liked about the first game and made it bigger, smoother, and even more satisfying to play. The movement feels amazing here, and once the game really opens up, Ori becomes one of the most fun characters to control in the entire genre. There is a real flow to the platforming that makes every section feel graceful and rewarding. I also think the combat is much better this time, with more options and a stronger sense of progression that gives the whole adventure more depth. The world is larger, the side content is better, and the emotional tone still hits hard without feeling forced. Visually, it is one of the most gorgeous games on the system, and on Switch it still feels like a technical showpiece. For me, this is one of the absolute best platformer adventures you can play in 2026, no question. Prince of Persia. The Lost Crown was such a great surprise for me because it reminded me how fun a polished action platformer can be when the movement and combat both feel this good. Sargon is fast, responsive, and just really satisfying to control, which is always the first thing I want from a game like this. The platforming challenges get more creative as you go, and the time powers add a lot to both traversal and combat without making things overly complicated. I also like how the map design encourages exploration while still respecting your time. There is a lot to uncover, but the game usually gives you enough tools to stay engaged instead of frustrated. Boss fights are another big highlight because they look cool and actually test your timing. On Switch, this game feels like one of the freshest platformer adventures in years, and it absolutely deserves more love. The Messenger is one of my favorite indie platformers on Switch because it starts as one thing and then becomes something much bigger. At first, it feels like a stylish retro action platformer with tight controls, fast movement, and a great sense of humor. Then, once the game opens up, it adds more exploration and adventure elements that make the whole experience even more memorable. I love the way it plays with old-school design while still feeling modern and smart. The writing is genuinely funny, which is rare for this kind of game, and the soundtrack is excellent from start to finish. Movement is the real star though, especially once you get into the rhythm of chaining jumps and attacks together. It feels so smooth. This is one of those games that constantly surprise me in the best way, and it is still one of the coolest platformer adventures on Switch. Shovel Knight Treasure Trove is an easy pick for this list because it gives you so much quality in one package. What started as a brilliant retro-inspired platformer turned into this full collection of adventures, and each campaign brings something a little different. The original Shovel of Hope is still fantastic with tight controls, great level design, and that perfect old-school challenge without feeling unfair. But what really makes Treasure Trove special is getting the extra campaigns too. Playing as Plague Knight, Spectre Knight, and King Knight changes the feel of the game in fun ways, and it keeps the whole package fresh. I also love the art style and music because they absolutely nail that classic vibe while still feeling polished and full of personality. On Nintendo Switch, this is one of the best platformer collections you can own, and in 2026 it still feels just as essential. So yeah, if you are looking for the best platformer adventure games on Nintendo Switch in 2026, these are the 10 I would put in front of anyone without hesitation. You have got pure magic like Super Mario Odyssey, emotional masterpieces like the Ori games, intense action with Metroid Dread and Prince of Persia, and incredible indie picks like Hollow Knight, The Messenger, and Shovel Knight. That is a seriously stacked lineup. Let me know which one is your favorite, and also tell me if there is a platformer adventure on Switch that you think deserves way more love. I always like seeing what games other people would add to a list like this. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.